Hello, and welcome to a podcast of the Yakima Symphony Orchestra. My name is Jeff Snedeker. I play principal horn with the orchestra, and this is our music director, Golan. We're here to talk to you about an upcoming concert of the Yakima Symphony. This one will occur on Saturday, April 2nd, 2011, in the Capitol Theater in Yakima, Washington. The theme for the concert is Final Thoughts. And the works that will be presented are three works that constitute the last orchestral works by three very famous composers. These composers are Aaron Copland, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, and Peter Tchaikovsky. The Copland piece that you've chosen for this is in fact his last orchestral work, but it has a bit of an uneven historical or history to it, right?
That's right. Yeah, well, the first two pieces were written in 1959.
Of the three, yeah, these are the three Latin American sketches, right?
Exactly.
Or Latin?
Yeah, Latin American
sketches, right.
And the first two were written in 1959, but when he played them, he felt that they were too short to stand on their own. So later, in 1973, I believe.
Yeah, 72.
1972, he wrote a third one and put them together to form these three Latin American sketches.
And they're paced kind of fun, right? It's sort of I mean, you could justify putting them on a Pops concert, couldn't you?
Well, I think almost. They're pretty. They're almost right in the middle. They're pretty light for a classical concert, maybe a little heavy for a Pops concert, but they could probably work on either one.
Well, there's some dance material, right, on either side, right?
Exactly.
On the two outer ones, and the middle one is very lyrical.
Right. Some very energetic and typically Latin dance rhythms, such as alternating between 6/8 and 3/4 time, like da 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 da. You know, that from West Side Story. That same rhythm, different notes, but the same rhythm is used quite a bit in the Copland.
And he did that quite a bit. He had several pieces that were inspired by Latin America. Some of that had to do with his friendship with Chavez there in Mexico. And as a result, he had many trips there, lots of inspiration. Really fun and a nice opener, I think, for this program. The second piece is Mozart's Clarinet Concerto, also his last orchestral work.
That's right. And this will feature our wonderful principal clarinetist, Jeffrey Brooks.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one of the interesting things about this piece, from a historical standpoint, is that it was originally written for an instrument called basset horn. But the basset horn doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, we can make recreations of them, but for the most part, the basset horn has been replaced by the clarinet. The problem is, the clarinet doesn't have some of the lower notes that the basset horn plays.
Right. The soprano clarinet, as we call it, is the sort of normal clarinet that you see in an orchestra or in a band. Many folks know that there are bass clarinets and alto clarinets, that sort of thing, that are in different sizes and sort of make up a clarinet family. Well, the basset horn in this case falls between the alto clarinet and the bass clarinet. So it's quite a bit longer. It's sort of like the difference between an oboe and an English horn. So it's quite a bit longer, but it's not that popular anymore. Now, Mozart wrote actually several pieces that included basset horns in them. For some reason, he just liked the sound. He also knew at least one person who was quite good on the instrument. Stadler was his last name. And Stadler was always looking for new works to take on tour, and it turns out that this is a piece that Mozart wrote for that purpose. The thing that's fascinating to me about it is how well it works. I mean, what happens is if you use a regular soprano clarinet on it, then you have to rewrite some of the original. But here's the funny part. To me, the clarinet part that we knew of for years that everyone thought was the original was actually a doctored part for the soprano clarinet. It wasn't until sometime fairly recently that people found what appears to be an original of this with a concert program that has Stadler pictured on the cover, or a drawing of him on the cover, playing this instrument, or something like that. And so we actually can see what the instrument looked like. And so people have actually built them, and now they've recorded this piece with that in its original form. But what's entertaining about it is that for years, This was the Mozart Clarinet Concerto, and but it was not even the original, and no one even knew it. But it works both ways.
It sure
it's
does.
a gorgeous piece of music. The last piece on the program is another sort of surprising piece when you learn a little bit more about its history. It's certainly one of Tchaikovsky's greatest symphonies. He wrote 6. The last 3 in particular get a lot of attention. And I was quite surprised to find out that this particular symphony, the 6th, the Pathétique, was, according to concert programs, one of the most popular symphonies in the first half of the 20th century, equal in popularity to Beethoven's 5th Symphony, which is pretty amazing, particularly since in the latter part of the 20th century, the 4th and 5th Symphonies seem to get most of the attention.
That's right, and another surprising thing about it is the way this symphony ends in a very soft, dying away manner, as opposed to the big, exciting, conclusive endings of most symphonies, including his 4th and 5th Symphony.
Well, and what's interesting to me is that in both cases of the 4th and the 5th Symphonies, they are triumphant symphonies. They're upbeat, even in their darkest moments. They're still hopeful, and there's there's a search for love or something like that, which is interesting only in the fact that if you look at the letters and accounts of his life during the periods of time that he wrote those 2 symphonies, he was always talking about how depressed he was and how terrible a composer he was, and he thought these particular symphonies were weak, and yet they are truly great masterworks. It's a bit different, isn't it, with the 6th Symphony?
It is. At this part of his life, he was also very depressed, in fact, so much so that he committed suicide. At least that's what the research has shown. And you really do hear that in this symphony. However, there are some extremely triumphant moments. I mean, the 3rd movement, music does not get any more exciting or triumphant than the 3rd movement of this symphony. And in fact, it's always so awkward when audiences are encouraged not to applaud after the 3rd movement, which is not common practice to do that. My feeling is, how can you not?
Right.
Go ahead. I mean, the music just makes you want to stand up and cheer, and that's just fine.
But then the 4th movement happens.
The 4th movement. Yeah, the incredible 4th movement, which essentially, well, the whole symphony really is a suicide note, but it really comes to the fore in the 4th movement, which is so dark and profound and pathetic in a way. And at the very end, actually, he's writing his own death music, and the music fades away. There's like a heartbeat in the string basses playing pizzicato, and that gets softer and softer, and then fades away to nothing. And in actuality, Tchaikovsky died 9 days after conducting the premiere of that piece.
It's amazing to think of it in those terms. I mean, the whole issues surrounding his death are a bit controversial. I mean, his struggles with homosexuality have been well documented, and yet, that things could get so low in his life, whether it was related to that or whatever other issues he had. It's very sad and very revealing, I think, when we look at that symphony that way, because, I mean, again, because so much of his music seems to be opposite of how he described his life at those same times. He really must have known that the end was near.
Right, he really did. One other thing I think it might be interesting to note for our listeners is that this concert, the Tchaikovsky, is going to be recorded by public television and broadcast all over the Pacific Northwest, including Seattle and Vancouver.
That's exciting. That's a big step for our orchestra.
It is.
We haven't had that kind of exposure.
That kind of pressure.
I'll be practicing. Anyway, well, interesting. Thank you for joining us for this podcast of the Yakima Symphony. We look forward to seeing you at our concert called Final Thoughts, the last orchestral works of 3 important composers, Copland, Mozart, and Tchaikovsky. Saturday, April 2nd, 2011, 7:30 p.m. at the Capitol Theater in Yakima, Washington.